Welcome to Average Joe's Pool, and this is another in our series of DIY pool table installation videos. And in this particular video, we're going to be showing you how to do a full pool table cloth installation. And the process that you'll be seeing in this video is particularly well suited for worsted cloths that have a very tight weave, such as the Simonis cloth that we have here. The cloth that we're installing in this particular video is a Simonis 860 HR. However, the basic process that you'll see here does apply to all pool table cloths, but as mentioned, it's particularly well suited for tight woven worsted cloths. So let's take a look at what's involved. So I know you want to jump right in and start your cloth installation. However, before you do that, there are a couple of things that you do need to consider, and I'm going to cover those really quickly for you now. So first of all, we will be adding links for 3 important videos into the video description below that you might want to check out. So the first video is worsted versus napped. Now, not all pool table cloths are the same. The main 2 types are worsted and napped cloths. It's important to realise that the video that you're watching right now is better suited for worsted cloth installations. If you're not sure which you have, or you don't know what the difference is between the 2, then be sure to check out that video before you start. And video number 2 is our pocket liner video, and you should seriously consider fitting pocket liners to the slate pocket edges. And that video explains what the benefits of them are and also how to do it. And if you do want to add them, it must be done before the cloth is installed, so you might want to check that out as well. And perhaps most importantly, video number 3 is the stretch index video. And when it comes to installing worsted cloths, we use something that's called the stretch index to ensure that we get an even stretch around the table. And this is a measurement that tells us how much stretch we have in a particular cloth. And that measurement will vary from brand to brand and also to a smaller degree from colour to colour. Now, if you've already looked it up and you know what the stretch index is for your particular cloth, then that's great, you're good to go. But if you don't already know the stretch index for your cloth, you'll definitely want to take a look at that video before you begin. And finally, as you'll see as we progress through this video, you are going to need a selection of tools for the cloth installation. Now, all of this equipment that you can see here, we will be adding Amazon links for it into the video description below. And we've already shopped through and made sure that we found the very best deals for you. So if you do find this video helpful, please be sure to help support what we do here at Average Joe's Pool, and please be sure to use our Amazon links in that video description below. So before we jump into fitting the actual cloth, there's a couple of basic checks you should do on your table beforehand. First of all, you should measure, once you've got good access to it, the thickness of your slate and also the thickness of your backing material, and just write that down because that may be useful for you later in the process. And the second thing to look out for, especially if you've got a brand new table with brand new slates, is just to have a feel around the edges of the pockets. And what you're looking for is to see if there's any kind of sharp edges that have been left there when they've done the grind. Now, generally with good quality slates, you should find that it's super smooth all the way around. However, on some of the cheaper slates that are out there, you may find you get the occasional little sharp edge just where it's almost not quite finished properly. Now, if that's the case, it's a good idea at this stage just to grab a sanding block and just take that down just a little bit just to smooth that off. The reason being is that when the balls get hit into the pocket, they can bounce back and hit the face of the slate. And if you've got an edge that's sharp in there, then what that's essentially going to do, that's going to cut through your cloth really, really quickly. So it's always a good idea at this stage, before you fit your cloth, just have a little feel around them, make sure they're all smooth. If you do find any sharp edges, just give them a little rub over with a sanding block. Now, even though we vacuumed off our Bondo dust, if you feel the surface of your slate, chances are you can probably still feel some particles on there. So it's a good idea just to give it a quick wipe over. What you want to do is grab a damp cloth. You don't want it wringing wet. Just a damp cloth. Just give it a good scrub. And as long as you don't put it on too thickly, it dries off pretty quickly as well. This will help pick up the last of that dirt. So give the whole table a complete wipe over. Again, make sure it's just a damp cloth, not wringing wet. And it dries pretty quickly, and then just check at the end, see how it feels. And you may need to do it, once or twice, depending. But what you're looking to do is try and get rid of as much of that dust and particles from the surface of the table as possible. So that's it, we're all set. So let's jump straight into the cloth installation. Let's roll. So to lay our cloth out on the table, at the moment it's face side up, what we're going to do is we're actually going to flip it over and put it so the rear of the cloth is facing up just for a moment. And just lay that out. What you want to do is have a good look over the cloth, see if there's any kind of stray threads, anything that you need to get rid of, because of course anything that's stuck to the cloth on the underside will be on the underside of the cloth when you fit it. So now's your opportunity. Anything you need to get rid of, have a good look over it and make sure you're 100% happy. So once you've checked the back of your cloth, we're good to lay it down. So I'm just going to turn it over. And if you fold it in half, hold that nice and tightly. I'm just going to use this as a brush to go sideways to get rid of any particles that may remain on the surface of our slate. And then we'll open it back up, and this time it should be playing surface up. So the next thing to take in mind is we need to establish which side are going to be our anchor points and which sides are going to be our stretch points. The reason being is we use one side and one end as anchor points, and then we stretch away from those. So you need to know right at the very start which is going to be your stretch side, which is going to be your anchor side, which is going to be your stretch end, which is going to be your anchor end. So for us on this particular table, we're going to have this side as our anchor side, and we're going to have this end as our anchor end. So then of course that side is going to be our stretch side, and that end is going to be our stretch end. So anchor, anchor, stretch and stretch. So first thing I'm going to do is align my cloth on my anchor point, so this side and this end, so that the bottom of my cloth is level with the bottom edge of the bottom of my wooden backing on my slates. So all we're doing is we're moving the cloth just down a little bit, just so the bottom of cloth is level all the way along with the bottom edge of our slates. And we want to do this on the anchor side and also the anchor end. So I need to pull it that way, about an inch. Now the reason for this is because we're going to anchor these two sides into place, and so we really don't need any spare material on our two anchor sides. We want all that spare material to go into our two stretch sides. Now, one thing to mention really quickly before we go any further, please do double check that you've definitely got the playing surface of your cloth facing up. And some manufacturers, they will put a sticker on indicating which is the playing surface. Other cloths such as the Simonis that we have here, they have Simonis logos around the edges. But generally it's very easy to determine the difference between your playing surface and the rear of the cloth. If you turn them over so you can see them next to one another, you should notice that the rear of the cloth is noticeably more fuzzy than the nice smooth surface that we have, which is your playing surface. So now on the anchor side, this is our centre pocket right here. What we need to do is need to make a mark to the outside. There's the edge of the centre pocket right there. Need to make a mark to the outside on both edges. And the mark should be 13/16. So I've set this up at 13/16. So you want 13/16 from our edge. So our edge is right here. One mark there. Exactly the same here on the other side. Now I'm doing it in pen here just for the sake of clarity. It shows up better on the video. If you prefer to, you can use pencil, but don't worry about it. All of these marks, remember, anything that we're doing here at the moment is all going to be underneath your rails, so you're never going to see this regardless. Even if you were to make a mistake and you have to remark it, it doesn't matter. Everything here is going to be completely under the rails. Now the reason that we're putting a mark to the outside is, as you'll see later in the process, what we're going to be doing is we'll actually be moving that mark into the centre edge there, and this mark into the centre edge. And what that will do, that will give us some spare material in our pocket. And you want a bit of extra baggy material in the pocket because it makes finishing the pocket even easier. So that's why we're marking that set distance out. Later on, as you'll see, we're going to move that in to create bagginess in the pocket there. So So now I've moved over to the stretch side of the table. Again, this is our center pocket, but we are now on the stretch side. And again, we need to make a mark, but we're going to do the mark at a slightly different distance. On the stretch side here, we're going to do it at 5/8 of an inch. So again, from the edge of the slate just there, put a little mark there, 5/8 either side of the pocket opening. So now on my adjustable square here, I've set this up so that the distance is my stretch index for my cloth. Now for my cloth here on this size table, it's 1 9/16 inches. But of course that will likely be completely different for you, but whatever your stretch index was, set your square up to that measurement. And what we're going to be doing next is we're going to be extending this line up onto the top of the cloth. And when we do that, we want to draw a line in this direction and then also coming across the top away from the center pocket. So there's center pocket there, so I'm going to bring this line up and away from that center pocket. So I'll just get that aligned with my line at the bottom there. Just like that. So again, this is pointing away from my center pocket. So now I'll do exactly the same thing on the other side. So now I'm going to flip this over, make sure I'm aligned with my line here. I'm just going to extend that up and away from our center pocket. So now we've got this set to that distance already. What we're going to do is we're going to draw almost like a dotted line. It's about every 6 inches or so. Just using the end of the tool there, it's going to put a little line across the top. So what we'll effectively ended up with is like a little dotted line across our cloth here. And the reason that we're putting that on, remember this is on our stretch side. So once we've anchored up the other side, on our anchor side, we're going to be stretching this cloth. So this line, this dotted line that will be here, will actually be moved to our corner here. So we're going to use this as a guide, so we put the correct amount of stretch in. So we're going to stretch it until this line comes to the edge, and that's the perfect time to staple it. So that's why we're creating this little dotted line as a reference point. And for your final line, don't get too close into your pocket. Probably about 8 inches away there, that's perfect. Now I need to repeat this same dotted line going in that direction of our center pocket. And again, don't come too close to the corner pocket here, about 8 inches away, perfect. So next we need to come back to our center pocket here on the anchor side of the table. And we are going to put a couple of staples in here. A couple of things to note with the staples. If your backing material is a timber, then the best staples to use are T50 1/4 inch. If however your table has an MDF backing like this one here, it's best to use a slightly longer leg. If you have MDF, it's best to go for a 3/8 of an inch. And also when we put these first staples in just a second, ideally if you can, you want to put the outer ones in next to the pocket here vertically. However, our backing material here on our slate is particularly thin, and so there's barely enough room to get a vertical staple in. Normally these are considerably thicker than this, and so putting a vertical staple in is not a problem at all. So if yours is quite shallow like ours, instead of putting a vertical one in, rather than going fully horizontal, we kind of put it in at a slightly shallow angle. So what we're doing is we've got the edge of the pocket that's here. Remember we made our mark, which is actually slightly to the side of the edge of our center pocket. So now what we want to do is we're going to move this cloth directly sideways. We want to put this line so it's directly on the edge, on the corner, right here on the center pocket. Now the reason that we do this is we actually want to pull some material into the pocket, because we actually want a little bit of bagginess in the pocket here. It's going to make it easier to finish the pocket. That's why we initially set these lines to the outside edge. We're now pulling them to the actual edge, so we end up with spare material right there where we need it in the center pocket. So now put 2 staples in. Like I said, if you can do them vertically, do that. Otherwise, at a shallow diagonal. So now what we're going to do is grab about 6 or 7 inches to the side of that, and we're going to pull this directly sideways. What we want to do is just take the spring out of it. We're not trying to stretch the cloth. That little bit of spring that we've got there, we're just going to take that to the spring ends. We're not going to force it any further than that. Make sure that it's aligned still with the bottom edge of our frame here, and we get 2 more staples in to hold it on this side. And then the gap that we've got here, you can just fill in with horizontal staples. So now we need to do exactly the same thing on the other side of our centre pocket. So again, pulling our mark directly sideways, so it's flush with our corner. 2 staples. And again, 6 or 7 inches to the side, just stretch that cloth just to take the spring out of it. You're not trying to force it. That little bit of spring that the cloth's got, just take it to the edge of that. And again, make sure that your cloth is nicely aligned with the bottom of your backing. And then just fill in this gap, horizontal staples. So as we can see, we've now got that spare material right where we want it here in our centre pocket. Next, still working on the anchor side, come towards your corner pocket. Now what we want to do is we want to put a little bit of stretch on this cloth so that we can get a couple of staples in next to the corner of our corner pocket right here. And with regards to the stretch here, what we're not looking to do, we're not looking to pull the cloth, we're not looking to stretch it at this point. So what you want to do, it can always be done with 2 fingers. If you pull that cloth, you'll see the slack comes out of it, and you get to a point where it wants to bounce back. And that's what we want to lock in. So you shouldn't need more than 2 fingers. We're not trying to force it back, we're just kind of pulling it back, but not ridiculously tight. So again, just stretch that material so that you can feel it springy. Lock it in there. Make sure we're flush across the bottom edge. 2 staples. So next, ensure that the bottom of your cloth is definitely flush with the underside of your slate lining, all the way from your corner pocket here, all the way across to your centre pocket. Then what we're going to do next, we're going to put our horizontal staples approximately every ½ inch, dot them along here, going to fill this gap in between our corner pocket going across to our centre pocket. So now we want to repeat this exact same process again on the anchor side, on the opposite side of our centre pocket. So once again, corner pocket still on the anchor side. We're going to do that 2-fingered stretch just so we get the springiness of the material. Just there, lock that in. Make sure we're flush across the bottom. If you can, 2 vertical staples or diagonal if you can. And as before, a staple approximately every ½ inch. We're going to fill the gap in, moving all the way down towards our centre pocket. Make sure that the bottom edge of your material all the way down is nice and flush with the underside of your slate backing. So next, moving on to the centre pocket, this is on our stretch side. Exactly as before, we've got our line slightly offset from the edge of our centre pocket. And of course on the top here, we also have our stretch mark. So what we need to do now is we're going to grip the cloth and we need to pull the cloth inwards so that this mark aligns with this, and then once you've pulled it inwards you're going to pull it straight down so that this mark here comes flush with the top edge just here of the corner of the slate. So this little mark here will be aligned with this bit here. So remember to go sideways, make sure we're aligned there, stretch the cloth straight across the table in this direction. We're looking for the alignment right here. Two vertical staples to lock that in. And whilst maintaining that stretch, we're going to carry on a few more staples to about the width of our tool there, so about 3 to 4 inches. Finishing with 2 verticals. And then release the stretch. And then now we're going to do exactly the same thing on the opposite side of our centre pocket. So again, clamp onto the material. Remember, we do need to come sideways. We need to ensure that our top edge and this edge, this line here, are both correctly aligned. Hold that stretch, 2 vertical, horizontals, 2 vertical at the end of the width of the tool. Release the stretch. So next we're moving to the corner pocket. This is on our stretch side. And remember, we made our last one of our marks here about 7 or 8 inches away from our corner pocket here. The reason for that is we need to ensure that when the cloth is stretched diagonally, we're not ending up with a mark that could be visible in the playing surface. Now you should be safe to put a mark at approximately halfway between these, about 3 to 4 inches from the corner pocket. But just to test, we're going to do a small diagonal pull on the cloth, pulling it directly in this direction. Let's verify the cloth's in the right position. These marks should line up. If they do, we're good to put another one halfway between these two. Now at the same time, do the same stretch test and put another mark on your opposite end. And so those marks are now our final outer stretch marks. So next what we need to do is apply a stretch and lock it in by putting a couple of vertical staples here in the corner. Now for this stretch you want to pull as much cloth into the pocket as we can, so we're pulling mainly diagonally. However, at the same time we want to attach our tool below our stretch point here, so we're going to be bringing it into the corner pocket, but then we also need to start to bring it down. And then what we want to do is we want to get a line of staples here, so a couple of vertical staples, several horizontal, and then a couple more vertical, exactly like we did just a minute ago on the center pocket. So next we're going to clamp onto our cloth again and get it nice and straight. Hold our stretch there and start putting in horizontal staples. And don't go too far beyond the width of your tool here. Then from the end of your staples, come across a few inches, about 3 or 4 inches, lock on here. Again, pull this mark straight down, level there, staple in the width of your tool. Come back to your gap here, just make sure that feels good, don't pull it too much, just take the stretch out of it, just there. Then continue along here, so again a gap of a few inches, lock on, straight down. Come back, we'll just double check our little gap here. I'm just going to repeat this all the way across until we've closed the gap on this side between our corner pocket and our side pocket. So once we've closed off this side, we're going to repeat this process again, working on the stretch side, coming from the opposite corner back in towards our centre pocket. Again, lock this tool on, 2 or 3 inches from the end. And once again, what we're looking to do is we're looking to pull the material diagonally into this corner, then at the same time using our tool, we've also got to bring this down so that this edge ends up down here. So a nice firm stretch, and down. And we're going to do exactly like we did on the other side, leaving a gap a couple of inches, clamping on, pulling our cloth down nice and straight so that we get this aligned, staples in the width of our tool. Quick tip for you when you're pulling these is make sure that you place yourself directly in front of it. If you're kind of slightly out to the side here and you're trying to pull it, you can sometimes pull it a little bit off line. Try and get directly in front of it. Pull that down, lock it down, staple in the width of the tool. And then just want to go back for our gaps here, clamp on. We're not looking to stretch it any further, just making sure that the stretch is still on. Getting a little bit close there, so I can give myself quite enough space. So after a staple pop, I'll just remove that one. And another little tip when you do this, again, make sure you're nice and straight. When you pull it down a little bit further, and then you can kind of see where the bottom of the slate edge is. And that gives you something to align your staples to. So when you close your side pockets, you should start on your anchor side. Now, to make sure we get our cuts as accurate as possible, it's a good idea to grab yourself a pencil. I'm going to make a few faint marks on our cloth here, so we've got marks to align to when we come to make our cuts. Now what we want to do is we want to stretch the pocket. It's only like a 2-finger stretch, fairly tight with 2 fingers. And what we're going to do is actually going to mark it, measuring from the corner here of our pocket, coming in. I'm going to mark it at 1.5 inches, and that's in the dead centre of the side pocket. And the reason that we've marked 1.5 inches from the edge of our slate here, where the slate drops off, is because when we come to make our cuts in a minute, we want to make sure that the cuts go right the way under the actual slate surface. So this is on the assumption that we have a 1-inch slate, which is what we have here. And now you can make your cuts can be anywhere between 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches. From there will be fine, but you don't want to go too close, because obviously if you go into that final inch, then you're going to end up with a cut that's going to be visible on the face of the slate. Again, holding nice and straight, just for the sake of ease, I'm just going to draw that line on straight down the centre. So that's going to be one of your cut lines. So what I'm going to do, just going to mark approximately 1 inch to that side. Likewise 1 inch to that side. Again, we want to put our same stretch on there, nice and straight down the middle. Make sure we're still at 1.5 inch stretch there. And we want to bring our mark down 1.5 inches. There, so I'm actually just above my mark, so it's going to be right about there. Likewise, do exactly the same thing on the other side. Nice straight stretch. Make sure we're stretching at the same amount, still at 1.5 inches. Measure in 1.5 inches there. Yeah, okay, and on this side I'm a little bit higher, just there. So now I can basically just follow these 2 lines down. If they were straight cuts, almost in a V shape. So one there, one there. So all 3 of these cuts meet at the bottom of this cut right here. As you can see, what we're creating here when we cut these is we're actually creating like little tabs, almost like little pie shapes. And this is exactly what we need, because we need to make a pie shape that we're going to pull down, but also allows us to form it around our pocket. So finally, same stretch, make sure you're still at 1.5 inches. Just going to bridge the front of the edge there, put an approximate mark across the front. And then the other thing we want to do, extended from this line here, again with our stretch. This is the edge of our pocket here. This is obviously the two outer cuts. We want to put one halfway between the two. So approximately halfway between this point here and this point here, we want an additional one. So make sure you've got your full stretch. And the same on the other side. I'm just putting these marks in to kind of help illustrate the process a little bit. So I'm 1.5 inches from the edge here, approximately halfway between the two. You don't have to put these marks on, you could just do this freehand. I'm trying to illustrate where the cut should be for you. And these two cuts should come down deeper than your first one, so approximately where the end of your thumb would be. Somewhere right in around there. These last cuts are a little bit lower down than the first ones. So what we'll end up with when we cut this, obviously we'll have essentially 5 little sections of pie. Okay, so next just looking at the corners here, you'll notice that our 2 marks are pulled kind of diagonally outwards slightly. They're kind of pointing slightly outward in that direction. That's completely normal because of course we've gone to those 2 corners on the opposite side of the table and we've pulled the stretch into those corners. So what that's done, the bottom of our cloth here has not moved at all, so that's where the staples are, but just that kind of that top little bit there towards the end is pulled out a little bit. That's completely normal. You've got a couple of options when it comes to cutting these tabs. One is to put the stretch on. Grab your utility knife and just very carefully make these cuts. Alternatively, if you've marked them out as we have, you can do it without the stretch. You can just cut these as you need to. However, before we make the cuts here, it's a good idea just to slice up the side of the slates here. Don't go too high, don't bring it right up to the corner. You want to finish it a few millimeters short and cut this up on both sides. The reason being is when you start to gather the pocket material up, you'll end up with a bit that kind of comes around the corner, and you either have to fold it around and staple it like that, or if you've pre-cut it, you can just kind of trim the excess bit off so you don't end up with a folded flap. So next we're going to grab our spray glue again, and when you spray this in, try and keep the top of the material quite flat in relation to the table. Don't lift it up too much because you don't want to be spraying a load of glue kind of halfway down the table. So just try and keep that low across the top so you're stopping the glue going too far down. Let's just mask this up a little bit just to protect the frame. Now I'm going to make my cuts. Now let's take these middle 2, put that stretch back on, push those down. We want to get one staple in on our backing material. Now move along to the next flap, trying to kind of shape the radius. So we use that glue a little bit as we go. Another staple. Again, just working this around, ironing out any little air bubbles that we get. Again, same on the other side. What you're looking for is a nice smooth surface. You're going to use that glue to help you get rid of the air bubbles. And with your little tabs here, you've got a couple of options. You can just cut it straight down, get rid of that. Or if you want to, if you've maybe got a wrinkle in here somewhere, you can kind of pull the wrinkle in a little bit down to that corner, get an extra staple down in there, and then just cut that bit off there. So with regards to tidying up our tabs, you can just get a pair of scissors and run them straight across the bottom, or if you prefer, you can just get a bit of tension on them, fold them underneath, and one staple just to hold it underneath like that. The choice is entirely yours, whichever you prefer. I prefer leaving the tabs there because just in case I need to make an adjustment, something goes a little bit wrong, I've still got a tab I can use to create a little bit of tension, get a little bit of stretch on. If I cut that off, it can make life a little bit more difficult. If we were to get stuck, we shouldn't, but you never know. It's nice to have the option. So I'm going to fold mine under, single staple, and underneath there for each of my tabs. So my tabs here, fold them underneath, one staple. Now don't panic if you see a few little wrinkles like we've got across the top of the pocket. Remember, we've only pulled the cloth in this direction so far. We've not pulled it in this direction at all yet. So when we do this, these will spread out. So now we just tidy these up. On this side I put an extra staple in just to get a bit more stretch. And if you need to, just an extra staple there just to get rid of any loose material on the underside. So this centre pocket's now finished, so we're going to do exactly the same thing on the opposite side of the table. So now we're coming around to the stretch side of the table. We're going to do exactly the same thing with our stretch here. Again, it can be done by hand. A nice firm stretch into the pocket. Again, don't worry about any wrinkles across the top. Remember, we haven't stretched it yet in this direction. Those will be pulled out when that cloth gets stretched outwards. So we're going to mark this up exactly the same as we did on the other side. So next you want to come to your anchor end of your table. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be stretching from the centre straight back. When we pull this back, we're not looking to pull this back at 100% of maximum stretch, just a little bit under. So probably somewhere around 80% of maximum pull. Now to help us get a gauge of that, when you pull this, if you watch the other end of the cloth, as soon as you see the other end starting to move, which will be about approximately 80% of your maximum pull, that's the perfect amount. So what we've done is we've just put a small piece of decorator's tape at the other end of the table, just to make it easier to see when the other side of the cloth just starts to move. So we'll be using our tool for the stretch here, and what you want to do is remember you want to stretch straight back until you get your stretch and then pull it down. You don't want to pull it straight down because obviously that won't allow the material to move properly. So nice and level, straight back, then down. And once we've got our stretch and we've taken it down, you want to get some staples in there, approximately the width of your tool, about 3 to 4 inches. So make sure you're in the centre. Again, you want to be straight in front of it. You want to pull it until you see the other end just starting to move. And then release your stretch. So now we need to go to our stretch end of the table. So now we've moved across to our stretch end, so we can get rid of our tape now. What we're going to do on this side, again, you want to get it in the middle, and we're going to do a stretch here. But this time you're going to pull it as hard as you can, 100% of the stretch, and then take it down. And then again, we're going to staple about 5, 6, 7 staples, the width of your tool. So coming back to our anchor end once again, this time working next to a corner pocket. So now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be stretching the material. We're going to be clamping on a couple of inches from the end here. And we're going to use our hand here. We want a nice firm pull diagonally in this direction. And at the same time, this also needs to pull down. And we're going to pull this down at the maximum stretch. And again, get about 6 staples in there. And remember, as before, on this pull, don't try pulling it straight down, it won't go anywhere. You need to pull it straight and then take it down. And this pull here is diagonally straight into this corner. Now I'm going to do exactly the same thing again on our anchor side on the other corner pocket. So next, also on our anchor end, we've just finished this corner here, and we've got our centre point here. So what we're going to do now is do a good stretch halfway between the two. And then once we've got that stretch, obviously we're going to put some staples in the middle there. A nice firm stretch and down. Now for our gaps here, clamp on halfway between them. Get as good a stretch as you can. Finish the egg. And likewise, this gap here. So again, exactly the same thing, still working on the anchor end. Here's our halfway point, here's our corner pocket. And again, I'm going to fill in our 2 gaps. So you should notice around your centre pocket now, the wrinkles that you had should have disappeared on the anchor side. The anchor side is this side here. We're still to do the stretch side. You see those wrinkles that were there before, now completely gone. So we've now come over to our stretch end, and we're going to do exactly the same thing here. So we're going to clamp our tool on here, about an inch or so from the end. Going to pull this nice and hard, 45 degrees, and also at the same time pull this out and down, and we need to get a row of staples in here. Maximum stretch. Again, clamp on, about an inch in the corner. Remember, 45 degrees there, and straight down, maximum stretch. So again, exactly the same thing on the opposite corner here. Clamp on, about an inch from the edge there. And again, pulling this cloth diagonally, maximum pull, this one down, straight back and then down. If you have a look at your side pockets now, you should see that any of those loose wrinkles that you had earlier, just with those stretches on the corners, those should now be gone. So again, just like the other side, halfway between our centre point staples and our corner staples here, going to grab halfway, give it a really good pull, maximum stretch, and then down, and again 5 or 6 staples in the centre there. Now again, in the middle of our gap here, going to grip, get as big a pull as we can in the centre there. Even on these little gaps, you need to fill those in, or you can try and get a little bit of stretch there as well. Exactly the same thing on the other side, just here. Nice stretch, as good as you can get it. Halfway between the 2 points. And halfway between these two. So now our stretch end is also fully stapled. Now when it comes to doing your corner pockets, the principle is exactly the same as doing your side pockets. However, the corner pockets tend to be a lot easier. The reason being, on a corner pocket you've only got literally a quarter of a circle, whereas when you're working on that side pocket you've got a full semicircle, 180 degrees, so you've got a much wider angle to try and work the cloth around. So it's definitely easier on the corners. And on this particular table, we've actually got the very corner edges have been smoothed off because they're all under the rails anyway, and they're not actually required. And so essentially we've got like a little bit off of the corner of the slate, which has been cut back, which makes fitting these even easier. However, you might not have that. You might have the full profile there. But as I mentioned, if you've already done a side pocket, regardless of what you've got here, this will be a lot easier. So we can use exactly the same principle. We're going to stretch into the centre, going to mark in 1.5 inches, put a line down the centre, 1 inch to one side of that, 1 inch to the other side of that, and draw those two lines down to intersect. So let's start there. So pull some material into the corner. There's my centre approximately there. 1.5 inches. Just there. Looking for where my centre is. Slightly off centre there. So I'm just going to move that back across. It's nearer that point there. And I measure 1 inch either side of that. Small mark there. inch to that side, small mark there. So again, stretch, make sure you've got the full 1.5 inches there, measure in 1.5 inches pointing towards your dot, the corner of that right there. That's my first one. Again, stretch. So now this centre line, so I'll just extend that straight down. You can kind of see where these are pointing. There. There. And then what you do is you mark another point halfway between this one and the outer edge, somewhere in there, and you put a line slightly lower down, about 1 inch lower down, connecting there, and the same on this side, halfway between there and there, and join it down to that second lower line, about 1 inch lower than this one. However, if you've got the edges, these little corners that have been filed back, then we want to go from a slightly different point. So I'm just going to mark the bottom corner of the slate just there, without too much of a stretch on it. Just there, just there. And the reason being is because I've got that corner there, I'd ideally want to pull one tab that side of that corner, and the other tab directly underneath this shaved off part here. So I'm going to come from that bottom corner there. Same thing here, make sure I'm on that bottom corner. Those are my marks. So just like before, I want to cut up these edges just here. So I'm just going to cut straight up there, not coming quite up into the playing surface, sat just below, and likewise just cutting straight up there. Now I'm going to put my spray glue onto here. I'll just mask up on the underside. Now I'm going to cut my lines up. And nice stretch on your centre tabs. Pull those down, lock them down. You can either staple into the face here, or you can bring it up underneath and staple on the underside. Now you can pull this one across, if you've got the corners cut like we have. Stick that on there, trim off the excess. I'm just going to cut this so it's more of a tab. I've got a nice shape to pull up underneath. Again here. just so it's more of a tab ready to fold straight down underneath. Trim off the excess on this side. Make sure there's no air bubbles in there. Make sure that the glue's taking the cloth well. It's nice and smooth all the way along. You can go along now if you like with your scissors or a knife and just chop these little tabs off on the underside. However, I'm going to do that after I've done the final trim on these. So your next stage obviously will be to go ahead and to repeat this exact same process on your other 3 corner pockets. So now we're going to go ahead and go around the table and cut off all of our excess material. On our stretch end here we've got some lovely amount of leftover material. So if you'll be fitting the finishing trims into your pockets, this is the ideal material to use. When you trim your cloth off, try and keep it in as larger pieces as possible. It's always useful to have a bit of leftover cloth, not just for doing things like pocket trims, but also if you want to practice things like jump shots, you can kind of cut this into little squares, put that under your cue ball and have double protection for your pool table surface. So what we're going to do is run our scissors along here, cut it off flush with the bottom of our slate backing. So just go around and repeat that on all of your other edges to get them all nice and flush across the bottom edge. So for our rail holes, feel along the cloth and feel exactly where they are. What we need to do is we need to cut that out. So first thing we're going to do is grab our utility knife. First thing we're going to do with our utility knife, we're going to put a cross across our circle here. Now some people will leave that as just a cross, however it's not advised because when you push the bolt up through you get 4 little tabs that also push up, and that might push up into the thread of the bolt and then you can get yourselves into all sorts of problems. So rather than leave those little tabs on, what you're better doing is cutting this out so that you're cutting out the full circumference of the hole there. So you can either do it with a knife or you can grab some small scissors. I'm just going to follow around the outer edge, follow the shape of the hole. So now our rail bolt's going to be able to pass through that and not catch on anything at all. Now one little extra tip, and this is completely optional, this is something that I like to do, is to actually help prevent this from fraying, because this cloth is still under a fair bit of stretch. Now this will be bolted under the rail, so in reality it shouldn't really pull or shouldn't run at all. And so this step is 100% optional. But if you do want to help ensure that we don't get any pulls or runs in this material around the hole that we've just cut, then what you can do is just grab yourself some nail polish. Now this is just clear nail polish from the dollar store. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. If you just go around the edge, just want a very thin layer around the edge. You notice as you go around it actually soaks into the cloth. So you want a smaller amount around the outside like that, which will soak in, and then also make sure you go around the inner edge just there. And believe it or not, just that little extra touch there is a massive help in ensuring that this cloth will not pull or run. And you notice it soaks itself right into the cloth around the hole there, and this stuff will dry nice and crisp. And so it really does help prevent this from fraying, pulling or running, even if you were to put an extra bit of a stretch on it accidentally. So you're going to go around and repeat this for all of your rail holes all the way around the edge of your table. So with regards to these trims, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. We've already produced a video on how to do it using just cloth and staples, and we'll add a link to that video into the video description below. But the method that we're going to use today, we're going to also use a plastic strapping. And this is the stuff that you use. This is Oatey plastic hanger strap, and this is used mostly in plumbing applications for hanging pipes. This comes in a 3/4 inch width, and it's also fairly thin, so that makes it the perfect material to kind of shape around our pockets. Now if your backing material on your slate here is 3/4 inch, then you can just use this as is and you're good to go. However, if you've got a thinner one like we have here, then you may want to trim a little bit off to try and make it flush with the bottom when it's fitted correctly. So as well as our plastic strapping, the other thing that we're going to need, of course, is we're going to need some pool tablecloth. The first option, if you just replace your pool tablecloth and you've still got your old cloth, and assuming it's the same colour, of course you've got a huge amount of scrap material, so you can make these trims out of your old cloth. Or alternatively, you can use offcuts from either the cloth here from the sides or the ends, or of course from reclothing your rails. With regards to the size of the material, obviously you're going to need whatever width it is that you need, but what about the height? You have to remember our strapping here is 3/4 inch, and the way that's going to work is it needs to come down, so that's 3/4 inch. It needs to go over that, so that's another 3/4 inch, so you're already at 1.5 inches, and then you need enough material to fold underneath the slate and be stapled on. So you ideally want another minimum of 1.5 inches there. So you're going to need a minimum realistically of 3 inches of material plus the width that you need to fill the pocket. So the first thing you want to do is grab yourself a tape measure and go around the circumference of your pocket and get the measurement for the width of cloth that you're going to need. Now you want to subtract from that about 1/4 inch on that end, 1/4 inch on that end, so that's a 1/2 inch reduction in total. And of course, if you already fitted your pocket liners behind the cloth like we did earlier in our installation, then you can reuse those measurements. So once you've got that measurement, remember that's the width of it, and you're going to need height-wise a minimum of 3 inches of material. And then we also want to make sure that we measure up our corner pockets, because the corner pockets will be a completely different width to our side pockets. So now we need to take the measurement on our corner pockets. Now on the corner pockets we've got here, we've actually got the type where they ground the little corners off. Yours may well come all the way around and have more of a corner on it, but the principle remains exactly the same. So what you're going to do is measure the circumference. For us it's quite a shallow circle, from there to there, and remember if yours come all the way around, again you want to take about 1/4 inch off that end, 1/4 inch off that end, 1/2 inch total reduction off of your measurement. So now we have our measurement for both a side pocket and the corner pockets. Then we can go ahead and take a look at how we're going to actually make these trims. So what we'll do is cut our straps to the correct length. Obviously you've measured up the lengths that you need now. So you just want to cut your strips, mark them, and just cut them with scissors. Now because the lining on our slate is particularly thin, I'm actually going to cut these in half. So just mark the halfway mark. So I can just cut straight down this line. Now normally you can leave them at 3/4 inches, no problem at all. The lining on our slate is quite thin, so we're going to take these down to half the width. So I've now cut my strips, so I've got my 4 for my corner pockets and my longer ones, my 2 longer ones for the side pockets. Just a reminder, we've cut ours to half width because we have quite a thin backing material on our slate. Usually in most instances you can use these at the full 3/4 inch, no problem at all. So now I want to find some scraps of material that are definitely going to be wide enough for your trims. So see, that one looks good, and we've definitely got plenty of material there. Remember, if you're using a full width trim, it's going to go up the back, so that's 3/4 inch, down the front, that's another 3/4 inch, and then 1.5 inches in addition. So you need a minimum in your height of 3 inches of material. Now for us, we won't need quite that much because we've halved the size of our trims here. So once you've got scrap material that's definitely wide enough, I've got this scrappy bit on the top here, so I'm just going to draw a nice square line across the top and just cut that off. You don't need to cut them to exactly 3 inches. You're better off leaving as much material as you have available there. Obviously if you've got a super wide bit, you might be able to make 2 out of it. These are actually some of the trimmings from our rails here, so always good to recycle when you can. So now I've got a nice square piece of material ready to use. So that's one. So once we've got our piece of cloth and we've got our trim, what do we actually do? We've got 3 options when it comes to this, two of which involve attaching the cloth onto the trim here, and the other one is to do it freehand. So what you can do is you can just offer this up to your pocket, align the bottom, hold that in the correct place, and try and hold the cloth upward, put a staple in. You'll see the process in a minute. However, that can be a little bit tricky. It does make the job a lot easier if you're able to attach your plastic trim onto the cloth before you start the job. So to attach the trim onto the cloth, you've got a couple of basic options. Your first option would be to mask up the cloth, so you have a strip that's exposed the same width as your trim, and then bring in your spray glue and spray glue that on, and then literally glue the trim on. Put something heavy on top of it to keep it all flat and wait for it to dry. However, the alternative to that, if you're able to do it, and this is probably the best method, is to actually sew this on to the cloth. Now to do that, you're going to need a sewing machine with a decent thickness of needle in it, and you're going to want to do it on a nice slow speed. If you have a decent needle, it will punch its way through this plastic, no problem at all. Just keep the speed nice and slow. And all you need to do is just sew one line straight across the trim. And that's the method that we're going to be doing, so we'll show you quickly the process for sewing these in place. This method definitely makes for a nice clean job. You're not going to get any overspray on your cloth, you're not going to get any staining on your cloth. You haven't got to wait for glue to dry, but of course not everyone has a sewing machine, but if you do, this is definitely the best of the 3 options. So we need to have a quick think about which way up we attach our trim onto our cloth. The way that it works is when we offer it up to the pocket, this will be folded back down over the face of our pocket, and then this material will come under the slate lining. So we need to ensure that when it's folded over, it's the playing surface that's exposed. So then we want to start with the back of the material facing up. And with regards to the actual trims themselves, they already have a natural bend in them, so it's best not to try and fight that. So what you want to do is you want to sew it with the bend literally facing up, exactly like it is. So this is the back of the material here, trim bending upwards, and sew that on just like that. And then once that's sewn, of course, that bend will still be there, and it'll actually be formed with the material as well, ready to go into the face of the pocket to be folded over. So just a reminder, when you see us do this, we're going to be using our half-sized trims that we're going to be sewing on, but the process obviously is identical. It really doesn't matter what thickness you're using, the process is the same. So this is what they look like after they've been sewn. Technically they're actually this way up. You can see the curves in the right direction. So when we come to fit these, they'll be folding over, and then that'll be going under the slate on the bottom there. So now I just want to cut off this excess material I have, just poking out of the end of the trim here. You can use the trim as a guide. Just get this edge nice and flush. And just any excess on the side here, just cut that level with the end of the trim there. Just get rid of any little frayed bits of cloth, tidy it up, and we've got one there, good to go. So repeat this on the other 5, so you've got your 6 pocket trims ready to fit. So let's take a look at fitting our pocket trims. We'll start on the side pocket, which is generally a little bit harder than our corner pockets. Now what you want to find a kind of a natural line, hopefully you've got one there, that you can align the top edge to, just here. And what that line can sometimes be is often you'll find that your slate comes down and then your timber backing is actually slightly inset. So there's a small gap where it drops back, and that will give you a perfect line. If however you've got an MDF backing like we have on this slate here, when they cut and ground these pockets, they did it as one, so that so our MDF is absolutely flush with the face of the slate there, so that's straight down. We don't have any form of ridge there. However, early in our process, we did fit our foam pocket liners in behind the cloth in here. So I've got the bottom edge of that, which I can feel just there, And so that's going to be the line that we're going to work to. But it definitely does make these easier if you can find that line to try and align them up to. So what we want to do first of all is put this into our pocket. The cloth should be facing up at this stage. I'm just going to find the centre, so I'm just going to make sure that my ends are aligned evenly here and here, and that will give me obviously the correct centre point in here. Then what I need to do is I'm going to push the top edge of it up underneath my foam edge just here. That's going to be, as I said, that's the line that I'm working to right there. So once again, make sure that we get it central, have a look at the ends, make sure that the ends are evenly spaced, and that's going to give us our starting mark for our dead centre at the back here. So I'm now ready to put a staple in the centre here. Now with regards to staples, I've changed now because we've got to go through this thick material, so I'm now using a 1/2 inch staple. You can use 1/2 inch staple on these regardless of whether you've got a timber or an MDF backing to your slate. Now what I want to do is make sure I'm definitely up underneath that edge. I'm going to fire a staple right into the centre of the plastic. Now I want to fire another staple in right around here. So again, I'm just going to I'm going to push this trim up, make sure that the top edge is definitely resting against the my foam liner. Feels good there. Fire in another staple. And we just continue that round, always making sure you're getting the correct alignment. Just tucking it up underneath the foam that I've got there. And then the last one right on the outside edge. Now I'm going to do exactly the same thing, bring it round to this side. So again, making sure my top edge is tucked up on the line where I want it to be. And we'll start firing in these staples. So now I've finished my staples in here. I'm going to change from my 1/2 inch staples, and I'm going back to my 3/8 because I have MDF, or 1/4 inch if you've got a timber backing. So now we fold this down over. You can kind of get an idea of what it is we're going for. So now what we need to do to be able to bend this on underneath, we've got to cut a few slots. When it comes to making these cuts, obviously we don't want to come up too high because then we're going to end up with a visible cut. So we want to definitely end our cuts very short of the bottom lip just there. So first one, I'm just going to cut straight up the middle. And then you want about a thumb's width, just a little bit wider than your thumb. Again, double check the height on your cut. And then we're just going to divide the remainder into two. Again, make sure we're not coming up too high. We'll do the same thing here. A bit wider than your thumb. And this into two. I'm going to stretch these tabs under one by one and get a staple into each. I'm stapling on the underside of the frame, and again I'm not using 1/2 inch anymore. You should be using a 1/4 inch or 3/8 if you've got MDF like we have. So you're going to pull your tab down nice and straight. Stapler to help pin it in. One staple. Second one here. Repeat this all the way around. On your wider ones you may want to put 2 staples. So as you can see here, we've hidden all of those exposed staples that we had. They've got a nice smooth finished edge. So now I'm just going to come to the underside. I like to ensure that there's 2 staples in each of these. A couple of these only got 1 in at the moment. Make sure you've got all the staples in that you want, and then we're going to trim off these excess flaps here. Once you're happy that these tabs are secured, we can just go ahead and snip off the excess. So next we're moving on to fitting our trim, this time on one of our corner pockets. As mentioned before on this particular table, this is Noel House and Grand Champion 3. On the slates here, they actually grind the corners off. But on your pool table you may well have this corner still on there, so yours will look more like this. So these two flat areas that we have here, you won't have those. So the process is identical to our side pockets really, but of course being a corner pocket, you've got less, even if yours are extended, you've got a much smaller radius of circle to work to. You're working with a quarter of a circle rather than a full semicircle like you have on the side pockets. So again, just looking to get your ends aligned with the edges of your corner there, and that's going to give you your center point. And once again, we have our foam liners in behind our cloth here. So what I can do is I can use that as my straight edge and push this up underneath the foam, and that's going to be what I'm going to aim my center staple for. And that reminder, we're back on the 1/2 inch staples now. So then we're just going to work to one side again. We've got that straight edge to align to, so I'm just making sure I tuck it up under that straight edge. So the key is aligning the top edge correctly. That's what you kind of have to do a little bit by feel, depending on what you have to align to on your table. Now again, I'm going to swap from my 1/2 inch staples, and because I've got MDF, I'm going back to 3/8. If you have a timber frame, I should go back to 1/4. So fold that over and down. Now we need to make our cuts. Again, remembering we don't want to cut too far up. The ends of our cut we want to make sure are definitely completely on the bottom of our slate backing. So one in the center. And then you want to do the same thing here. Because ours doesn't come all the way back round, I'm just going to put one cut here, one cut here. If yours came a little bit wider, you may well want to do two. Now because these tabs are quite wide, I'm going to try and get 2 staples into each of these side by side on the underneath there. So now again, grab your scissors, go to the underside, make sure you're happy with the placement of the staples, make sure that everything looks firm. If you're happy with it, you can go ahead and cut these flaps off. And that's one of our corner pockets now finished. So now of course you've got to repeat that process 3 more times on your other corner pockets. And there we have it. That is the complete process on how to install your pool tablecloth. And please do remember, as we mentioned before, that there will be Amazon links for all of the different tools that we've shown in this video, as well as for various pool tablecloths to suit various different budgets. And we will add those Amazon links into the video description below. So if you like what we do here at Average Joe's Pool and you'd like to help support us to ensure we can bring you more videos in the future, then please support us and please be sure to use those Amazon links. And also, just before you leave us, it's worth noting that we have done a full video series on every aspect of pool table installation. And so if you do need help on any other aspect of pool table installation, be it leveling the frame, leveling the slates, clothing your rails, whatever it might be, we've probably already done a video for it. And we'll add a list of those videos into the video description for you in case you need them. So thank you for watching, we really do appreciate it. Can we ask one favour quickly in return? Can you be sure to at least hit that like button for us? It really does help us out. Likewise, whilst you're there, why not also hit that subscribe button and switch on notifications so you can find out about all of our upcoming videos. And as mentioned before, if you really want to help support us here at Average Joe's Pool, we have the super thanks option, or of course those Amazon links. And so thank you for watching, it's genuinely appreciated. We hope that your installation goes well, and we'll see you on the next video.